Hello and welcome to Monday Morning, where we react to the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. For obviously, this is Useful Idiots, and I'm Katie Halper.
And I'm Aaron Maté. Good Monday morning, everybody. It's great to see you. Hope you're having a good start to your week. Please like the stream if you like it. And yeah,
even
Katie.
If you don't like it.
Even if you don't like it, sure. Yeah, why not?
Just
Katie,
do it for the team, yeah.
And if you are a fan of Useful Idiots, we have an exciting announcement because you have a lot of content coming your way, not on this Monday, not just Monday morning, but tonight, Katie, you're doing a very special live event on YouTube. Yes.
So usually the Katie Halper show is on Tuesday nights, but this week we're doing a special combo stream. I'll be hosting with Brianna Joy Gray, Crystal Ball, and we'll be hosting a discussion with Norman Finkelstein and Muin Rabbani about the International Court of Justice. And I just put the link in the chat. And Wilson, you can add it to the description if that's okay. And it's going to be a great discussion.
And you're talking about the case lodged by South Africa at the ICJ against Israel, which both Norman and Muin have been following very closely.
Yeah, So it should be a great time. And also, thank you so much to all the people. We had some Useful Idiots fans, Aaron, show up at the live show that I did with Abby Martin and Rania Kalik and Claudia de la Cruz. And that was really fun at the People's Forum.
And what time tonight, again, is the Norman?
8 p.m.
8 p.m. Eastern time.
8 p.m.
8 p.m. Eastern time.
At youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show. youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show. Yeah.
All right. Well, so as we're recording this, the official death toll in Gaza has passed 25,000. Tens of thousands more wounded. Of course, the toll is far higher because there are people who have not been counted yet, who are dead and who are under the rubble.
And in part because they don't have the fuel required for the machinery to get people out of the rubble. So more people are dying than necessary, and more people are dead than we know.
Yeah, because this is a genocide that the Biden administration is supporting. And meanwhile, the violence is expanding because the Biden administration, rather than forcing Israel to stop its genocide, is increasing violence elsewhere to protect the genocide. So, for example, Biden keeps bombing Yemen in response to Ansar Allah blocking ships in protest of the genocide. And this week, or this weekend in Syria and Iraq, there was more violence because after Israel bombed Syria for the umpteenth time, it bombed Syria all the time. It killed some Iranian forces there. Iranian-backed militias retaliated and hit a U.S. airbase in Iraq and wounded some U.S. soldiers. So violence is escalating everywhere because the Biden administration refuses to stop support of the genocide. And you'd think, a genocide plus increasing violence elsewhere would dominate the news. But on Sunday, it didn't, because right now we're in primary season. And up next is New Hampshire. So that took up most of the attention. So we'll get to what we can in terms of Gaza coverage on these Sunday news shows, but there just wasn't all that much of it. But one thing that was interesting was seeing how voters are responding to Biden in Michigan. But before we get to that, let's hear our weekly recap from Meet the Press.
With Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning from Manchester, New Hampshire, where just 48 hours from now, Republican voters will go to the polls to decide whether this primary race is in effect over, or whether Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis can deliver the kind of comeback this state has long been known for. With her political life on the line, Haley is stepping up her attacks, while President Trump appeared to rule her out as a running mate.
Americans aren't stupid to just believe what he says. The reality is, who lost the House for us? Who lost the Senate? Who lost the White House? Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. Through these temper tantrums, Donald Trump is telling a whole lot of lies. But when you're dealing with the pressures of a presidency, we can't have someone else that we question whether they're mentally fit to do this. We can't.
Nikki Haley is a disaster. She is not presidential timber. Now, when I say that, that probably means that she's not going to be chosen as the vice president. All you need to know about Nikki Haley is that every globalist, liberal, a Biden supporter, and never Trumper is on her side.
And now the Haley campaign is...
That is true. The neocon contingent in Washington is firmly behind Nikki Haley. She is their candidate, and Ron DeSantis has dropped out of the race.
RIP. We should have. I hope everyone's sitting down, Aaron. We should have given a trigger warning.
I'm sorry, my bad. Yeah. So it really is now between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump.
Yeah,
and she's right about his
neocon appeal.
Well, no, she's talking about how he's been saying some really wacky things, and doesn't seem fully there. And we'll hear some of it today, but including that he suggested that she was somehow in charge of security on January 6th, which obviously is not true. But of course, he's right in saying that she is the favorite of neocons, because she absolutely is, because she is an unhinged neocon warmonger, and is in that respect firmly in line with Biden on everything that he's doing.
And I think she's actually scarier than Trump.
I think so too, and that's not an easy feat, because Trump, of course, there's plenty of things to fear about what he would do if he was back in office. But yes, I agree. Nikki Haley is definitely scarier than Trump,
and competent in a way that I think Trump isn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Expectations, saying she hopes to place a strong second place in what was once a must-win state for her, as Governor Ron DeSantis hits single digits in New Hampshire and moves resources to South Carolina.
What I want to do is be strong. We're not going to know what strong looks like until those numbers come in.
When South Carolina votes, I can promise you this, as the nominee, we'll sweep to victory just like we did in Florida.
Governor DeSantis had committed to appear on our broadcast, but pulled out of all of his scheduled Sunday show interviews late yesterday, citing a scheduling conflict. Haley is counting on...
Well, now we know what that scheduling conflict was. It was him announcing he's dropping out.
Right, exactly.
So, farewell to Ron. And he endorsed Trump. Trump was repeatedly mocked him and insulted,
called him Ron DeSanctimonious.
Ron DeSanctimonious. Ron DeSanctimonious is sanctimonious about Trump because he endorsed him. Yeah.
Independents, New Hampshire's famously undeclared voters, to give her momentum on Tuesday. I'm joined now by national political correspondent Steve Kornacki to break.
Well, sorry, everyone. I know you're dying to see Steve Kornacki at the board talk about New Hampshire, but we're not going to have time for that today.
No, because we're actually going to talk about some important issues.
It's so strange. Like, no one ever talks really about Iowa or New Hampshire throughout the year. These aren't the most important states politically, but yet all of a sudden, because of the primary schedule, everything like how they vote becomes so determinative. Whereas, like, if everyone just voted on the same day, it would not matter about these two states that otherwise no one really cares about. Very strange to observe as an outsider. Okay, well, we do have though some content of substance.
Yes. And a lot of people, ourselves included, have warned Biden. I mean, we obviously oppose the genocide for moral, ethical reasons, but we've also been saying that this is not going to do him any favors. Sometimes it works out that genocide is not popular among voters. So let's take a look at this panel discussion that Margaret Brennan of Face the Nation had with some voters.
Tassin, you did change your mind.
Yes.
On the president. Why?
I was a champion for Joe Biden until October 7th. I feel he's disowned us, disenfranchised us with his stance on Gaza.
What do you mean by that?
He's not listening to us. We are asking for a ceasefire at this time. It's a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Too many lives are being lost at this time. I was never a single issue voter. In fact, I used to argue with people not to be single issue voters, but for me, this is a deal breaker. Mm-hmm. Way too many lives have been lost.
When you say us, you're Muslim. Is that what
Yes.
you mean?
Mm-hmm.
You think the Muslim community here feels as you do?
Yes, I think a vast majority of Muslims, Arab Americans, even progressives who I identify myself as a progressive, and many people that I talk to in my circles are not going to be voting for Joe Biden.
Yes, that's right. Because the guy is unapologetically supporting a genocide and laughing or mocking people who are essentially trying to get him to stop. And here's another voter from this panel that Face the Nation spoke to.
Saba, you said reproductive rights are a huge factor for you, but that you probably won't vote for President Biden.
I think it would be hypocritical of me to use reproductive rights as a way to justify voting for Biden when Biden is aiding and sending military aid to Israel, which is airstriking Gaza and blocking humanitarian aids, leading to women there who are pregnant, either getting C-sections without anesthesia, not being able to be provided with prenatal.
Pretty good point from this young woman, Saba, which is that your pro-reproductive rights stance should not stop at the border. She really does a good job, I think, of threading the needle and saying, yeah, well, I'm pro-choice or I'm pro-reproductive rights, but realizes that, what Biden's doing is affecting the reproductive rights of women in Gaza. I mean, she points out that women are having C-sections without anesthesia, which is, awful. There are no hospitals for them to deliver in. I mean, they're not able to deliver babies safely.
Because Israel has destroyed most of the hospitals, made them inoperable. Yeah. And I believe there's something like 20,000 pregnant women right now in Gaza. There was just that video that came out of a baby who was saved from their mother's womb because the mother was killed in an airstrike, but they saved the baby. And you compare that story to all the coverage that was given to this lie that Israel spread that a baby was cut out of a woman's womb, an Israeli baby, which was not true, and U.S. officials spread that lie. So you have, all this still going on, and understandably, voters are turning away from Biden, and this is Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. She was questioned about this also by Face the Nation.
As we spoke to one of your constituents last night who said he went door to door for Joe Biden in 2020, but he's lost his vote in 2024, and he said he plans to protest against him. Mm-hmm. Is President Biden going to face protesters when he comes here because of this one issue?
He may. A lot of voters are going to vote for things like individual freedoms, like the basis of our democracy, climate change. So there are a lot of things that are going to come into play as we get closer and closer to the election. But certainly these are legitimate and raw feelings that people have, and they're entitled to their opinions.
Yeah, well, imagine if this is what cost Biden the election, his refusal to stop supporting a genocide by a foreign state.
And by the way, when people blame, if that happens, and it's totally plausible that Trump wins, by the way, and if that happens, people are going to blame the people who warned Biden to end the genocide, which he could have done, as opposed to blame Biden, the one person who had the power to do that.
Well, let's look at how Biden's handling this. He's very confident that Muslim Americans and Arab Americans will still vote for him because all he has to do is say the magic words, which is Donald Trump.
Are you concerned with the Arab American votes voting for you during this election because of Gaza? Many say they will not vote for you.
Well, look, the former president wants to put a ban on Arabs coming into the country. We'll make sure we understand who cares about the Arab population, number one. Number two, we got a long way to go in terms of settling the situation in Gaza.
Are you confident?
I mean, it was a Muslim ban more than an Arab ban, first of all.
Yeah, it was a Muslim ban. He didn't even get that right.
Yeah.
But yeah, he just thinks he can, just scream Trump and that will do the trick. But, I'm sorry, when you support a genocide and you block all efforts to stop it, there's going to be a consequence. And I just don't think people are going to be intimidated by him bringing up Trump again.
Right. I had Ali Abu. Sorry. Keep going.
No, go ahead.
I had Ali Abu Nima on like a month ago or something, and raised that issue with him because he was saying something critical of Trump, and I kind of I was like, oh, well, you're going to be blamed for Trump. And he said, genocide is the worst case scenario. We already have the worst case scenario. So you can't bully me with the lesser of two evils, because this basically is evil, the genocide.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's turn to White House Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner. We haven't seen him in a while.
No.
And his job now is not just to defend supporting the genocide in Gaza, but also to defend the Biden administration's use of force elsewhere to ensure that the genocide continues. And that's happening in Yemen, where Biden has ordered multiple strikes against Ansar Allah, which is the movement that controls Yemen. And they've been blocking ships in the Red Sea. No one has died in these operations by Ansar Allah. But nonetheless, Joe Biden wants to come in and make sure that they can't do that. So he's bombing Yemen, as the U.S. has done often and has been supporting Saudi Arabia in doing that for many years too. And so here's John Feiner.
And Ansar Allah is the Houthis, right? That's what they're referred to as, the Houthis.
Correct.
Just so people understand. Yeah.
Yes. So here's John Feiner.
To discuss it all is White House Deputy National Security Advisor.
I'm sorry, the hair, the facial hair and the head hair need work.
Well, he's so busy, Katie.
True.
Coming up with talking points to justify massacring innocent people in Gaza and bombing Yemen that he doesn't really have time for other pursuits.
You're right.
You know?
Yeah. True. Okay.
Sir John Feiner, great to have you here this morning. Mr. Feiner, I want to start with this very serious attack in Iraq yesterday. Ballistic missiles, rockets fired at Al-Assad air base, injuring several Americans, possible traumatic brain injury. This follows an attack on Christmas Day where we had a very serious injury. What can you tell us about it this morning?
Well, you're right, Martha. It was a very serious attack using a capability of ballistic missiles that pose a genuine threat. Through the skill of U.S. forces, many, if not most, of those missiles were shot down before they impacted the base, but some of them got through. And the United States has demonstrated in the past, when these attacks have taken place in Iraq and Syria, that we are going to respond when we deem it's necessary to reestablish and try to establish deterrence in these situations and to hold these groups accountable that continue.
You know, one option, rather than trying to establish deterrence to violence, is just not have U.S. troops in Iraq or Syria. Syria does not want U.S. troops there. They're not welcome. And Iraq has previously tried to vote out U.S. troops, but then when Iraq did that, the U.S. threatened to withhold Iraq's money, which was being kept in New York banks. So, you know, rather than putting U.S. troops in harm's way and having to defend them with anti-ballistic missiles and then to strike back at anyone who strikes U.S. forces, just you could pull them out. You know, that is an option.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not our style, Aaron. We have to respect our country's way of life. That's not the American way.
Attack us. I'm not going to get ahead of any decisions the president may make, but you can be assured that we are taking this extremely seriously, and we'll have more to say about it soon.
We've got Yemen as well, where there are retaliatory strikes, but it goes to the point that they strike, we strike back, they strike harder, we strike harder. So look at Yemen in this vital shipping lane. Even the president said it's obvious the Houthis have not stopped their attacks on ships, including U.S. ships. So where does this end? It's in this stage of tit for tat.
I guess I'd say a few things about what's happening in Yemen. One, these commercial vessels.
The tat offensive, we can call it. You're welcome.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Have every right under international law to apply the sea lanes that go around the Arabian Peninsula in the Red Sea and elsewhere. And the United States and a coalition of our maritime partners have established a presence in that region to try to safeguard their ability to do just that. This is not an attack just on the United States. This is an attack on the entire global economy, and the world is standing up and saying they won't tolerate that. In terms of how this is playing out, I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is deterrence is not a light switch. It requires a pattern and a practice of activity over time, and can't be assessed based on a snapshot of what's happening at any given moment. But the purposes here go well beyond deterrence. We are also seeking to degrade the Houthis' ability to continue launching these attacks. They have stockpiles of advanced weapons provided to them in many cases, or enabled to them in many cases by Iran, and we are taking out these stockpiles so that they will not be able to conduct as many attacks over time. That will take time to play out. But our approach is also diplomatic. We've imposed sanctions on the Houthis. We have gotten dozens of countries to issue statements condemning their attacks. We've gotten a statement from the UN Security Council, a resolution condemning these attacks and asserting the right to self-defense. And we're going to stay on top of this until and unless they stop.
But a couple things here. One is I like the way he cites international law, because clearly the United States cares about international law, as seen by the way that Israel totally ignores it, violates it, and the U.S. just stands back and doesn't just stand back. They arm Israel as they're doing it, and they both physically arm them and ideologically arm them, and arm them with legitimacy, but also with actual weapons. The other thing is that he talks about the UN as if they care about the UN suggestions, right? Like they keep voting, the US keeps voting the UN attempts to call for a ceasefire, impose a ceasefire. And then he talks about deterrence not being a light switch. And we're going to see Joe Biden talk about deterrence in a second. But how long does deterrence take? I mean, like, did we deter the Taliban in Afghanistan over 20 years?
Yeah, no, exactly. And also this whole thing of bombing Yemen, Biden likes to throw around Trump as the reason for everyone to vote for him. And one of the things that Biden campaigned on when it comes to foreign policy was he was going to change course on Yemen, because Trump was embracing Saudi Arabia too hard, and
Yes.
Biden was going to change that. And then Biden came in and basically did like a bait and switch. He said, we're going to stop supporting Saudi Arabia's offensive operations in Yemen, which allowed him to keep supporting the same operations, but just calling them defensive.
Defensive, right? Yeah.
But they did take Ansar Allah, the Houthis, off of the terror list, which Mike Pompeo had done. And that was a move that basically was a new death sentence for millions of people living in Ansar Allah controlled territory, because if it's under sanctions, then it makes it really hard to deliver aid there.
Right.
And,
So
but
what
Biden
Pompeo
just reversed.
Pompeo's thing was a death sentence. Yeah.
Pompeo did, yeah. And Biden reversed that when he came in office, but now they've just reversed that again. But they're saying, oh, this time we're going to have humanitarian carve-outs, which of course is always a lie. So even on the one thing where he kind of distinguished himself from Trump a little bit on this major humanitarian crisis in Yemen, even on that, Biden is going back. And for what? Also, he can keep the genocide in Gaza going, because Ansar Allah has said, we will not, we're blocking these ships so that Israel stops the genocide.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and in fact, let's see what Biden says, though. Is this really about deterrence? Because Biden gave a kind of honest answer here when he was asked by a reporter if the strikes against the Houthis, the strikes against Ansar Allah, if they were working. Let's hear what Biden had to say.
Working. Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
So he says, when you say working about the strikes against Yemen, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes. I mean, that should be an impeachable offense, in my opinion, personally. But, I mean, shout out to Biden for being honest that it's not going to stop them. And he's killing people not only immorally, but also in vain.
Let's go back to more of that clip of John Feiner.
JF.
Yeah.
You mentioned Iran's role in these conflicts. Iran's foreign minister said the following on Wednesday: the security of the Red Sea is tied to the developments in Gaza, and everyone will suffer if Israel's crimes in Gaza do not stop. All the resistance fronts will remain active. This could take a very long time. What is your decision-making when you are not going after Iran directly?
Translation, will you go after Iran directly? Like, can we have a war with Iran, please?
Yeah, why aren't you? And she's going to make this more explicit. Hold on.
First of all, I'd say we totally reject the justification and the rationale that because there is a conflict going on between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, that entitles a group to take actions, military action.
Does it entitle a group like the United States to take military action, which they're doing by arming Israel?
And bombing Yemen?
And bombing Yemen, yeah, right. Does it entitle the United States to take military action, actual military action, not just aiding and abetting it, but doing it themselves, right? In Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq? I guess so.
Against the entire global economy, against shippers, frankly, from countries that have nothing to do with that conflict, who are traveling through the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea and other places. That is totally illegitimate under international law, and we...
Again, likes to cite, he's a stickler for international law, except when it comes to Israel.
Stand wholly against it, as do our partners. Beyond that, we've said that Iran has been complicit and is involved in any number of these conflicts. We've said they were broadly complicit in the attack that Hamas perpetrated against Israel on October 7th, even if they were not directly aware of it.
Right. So why not?
Okay, hold on. Let's break this down. He just said that Iran is broadly complicit in actions including on October 7th, even though they were not aware of it in real time. How are you complicit in an action you don't know is happening?
Broadly,
broadly, right?
Broadly
Yeah,
complicit,
broadly, yeah, right.
That's a that's a criminal charge if you're broadly complicit.
Yeah, right.
That's a death sentence right there.
Right. Now, of course, if they're broadly complicit in October 7th without actually knowing about it, we're extremely broadly and narrowly complicit in what Israel's doing, because we actually know about it and are arming them in this. But let's listen to what Martha Raddatz says in response to that point.
Complicit in the attack that Hamas perpetrated against Israel on October 7th, even if they were not directly aware of it.
Right. So why not go
obviously
military
strong
action?
Supporters.
So why not military action against Iran? Hello?
Why not? Why not? This is the creative thinking that really exemplifies our media class, and why maybe they should be, rather than parroting government talking points, they should be setting policy, because clearly, we're not hitting Iran enough, so Martha Raddatz for president, everybody. That's what I say.
Yeah, seriously.
They're obviously strong supporters of Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is also waging attacks against Israel, and they support the Houthis and the Shia militia groups that are attacking us in Iraq and Syria. We have held Iran responsible for this in a number of ways. First and foremost, we have taken military action against sites in Iraq and Syria that are also tied to the IRGC, which...
It's like he's begging for approval. Martha, we have taken military action. We have launched military acts of aggression. Come on. We are being tough. Please.
Give us some credit. We've killed people. We've killed people. Don't worry, Martha.
Supports these militias. We have said quite clearly that we hold Iran responsible for the groups, the proxies that it supports and that it provides weapons to. Beyond that, I'm not going to sit here and say we are going to take this or that action ahead of decision making. But we have been quite clear, and we have been quite willing to take action to hold Iran responsible for these attacks in the past.
I mean, why not go after Yemen? Why not go after Syria? And why not just declare war against the whole thing? Take out Iran, Syria, and Yemen and Lebanon because of Hezbollah.
Fulfill the neocon prophecy. General Wesley Clark tells that story where shortly after 9/11, he went to the Pentagon and he said he was told of a list of countries that Donald Rumsfeld wanted to take out. And that included Syria and Iran. Iraq was up first, and that's what they did. So fulfill the neocon prophecy. Why not? And again, what is all this about? It's all just about striking states and groups that are disobedient, that don't accept U.S. hegemony, U.S. control of the world, and U.S. unfettered support for Israel. That's what it's all about. So anybody Yemen, Ansar Allah has been going after these ships. Are there other possible things you could do aside from military force against Yemen, which of course the U.S. has no business in? The U.S. doesn't control the Red Sea. It's not up to the U.S. to decide how ships pass through there. And of course, what the U.S. could do is stop supporting a genocide. And actually, states under international norms, do have an obligation to step in to stop genocides. And that's what Ansar Allah is actually doing. I think it's a genuine humanitarian intervention, and it's largely bloodless. They're not killing people on these ships. And so the U.S. is just, that's all they can see. It's just people that are disobedient and stand in the way, so they have to be hit with violence.
Absolutely terrible. Yeah.
Okay, we have
unforgivable.
We have more from our friend John Feiner.
And I want to turn to Israel, and we just have about a minute left here, but we cannot forget the horrendous attack on the Israelis. But you saw Sammy there in the beginning. Look at the response. People are starving. More than 20,000 people have died. There's devastating effects. You have said
25,000 people now is the official toll. Official toll, much higher in reality.
you had concerns about the way Israelis are conducting this war in the past and hoped things changed. Have things changed, and what will you do about them?
First of all, Martha, you're absolutely right that we have stood up for Israel's right to take defensive actions against Hamas so that this threat cannot be perpetrated against them again.
Yeah, 25,000 people killed is a defensive action. 2/3 of the vast majority of whom are civilians, 2/3 of whom are women and children. That's just Israel defending itself against. It has to defend itself against toddlers and babies. Disgusting. Sorry.
But we've also been quite clear that the way in which Israel conducts this conflict is of great concern to us. We have seen in recent days and weeks a beginning of a shift in a phase of the conflict that we have been calling for, where we would like Israel to.
This is the new talking point. We're seeing the beginning of a shift in a phase of the conflict. It's all
I can't
part
even call it a shift.
Yeah, it's at the beginning of a shift.
Beginning of a shift.
Yeah, and they came up with this language deliberately. This is like artfully and carefully considered rhetoric that they've like sat down at a table and gone over. How can we pretend as if we're moderating Israel's behavior? How can we do that when we're actually not? When we're giving Israel unfettered support, we're rushing weapons to Israel, we're bypassing congressional review, we're blocking or we're opposing Bernie Sanders' recent measure, which just called for a report on Israel's conduct in its mass murder campaign in Gaza. All Bernie Sanders was calling for was just for the State Department to produce a report assessing Israel's actions, and of course that was blocked in the Senate. The White House joined most senators in opposing it. So how can we pretend as if we're changing Israel's behavior, even though we're giving it complete support?
Focus more on high-value targets.
Don't worry, Aaron, because we're at the beginning of a shift.
The beginning of a shift.
Pre-shift.
Beginning of a shift of a new phase.
Yeah, exactly.
It's coming. Yeah.
Bullshit. Okay. Now, this is an interesting point he's going to make.
Where we would like Israel to focus more on high-value targets, on Hamas leadership, and we have seen them start to do that. We think that has to continue to take place over the course of the weeks and days ahead.
He's saying we want them to focus more on killing actual high-up Hamas people, maybe less on the wholesale mass slaughter of civilians.
Yeah, did he say they're starting to do that now? He said, let's go back a little bit.
To continue to take place over the course of the weeks and days ahead. But we've also been quite clear that they're on Hamas leadership we have been calling for, where we would like Israel to focus more on high-value targets, on Hamas leadership, and we have seen them start to do that. We think that has to continue to take place.
Wait a second. I thought this whole thing was an effort to destroy Hamas. So he's saying now they're only starting to focus on high-value targets. Wasn't that the initial point? Wasn't that why we had to all sit back and watch Israel slaughter 25,000 people, destroy hospitals, mosques, schools, homes, shelters, because they were going after Hamas? Now he's saying they're only starting to do that?
Yeah, they had to warm up, Aaron.
Oh, my God.
They had to warm up by killing 25,000 people, largely civilians. Now they can start actually going after the high-up Hamas people.
It's so sick. And of course, again, as we said many times, they don't have the right to fire a single bullet into Gaza. Not one. They only have the obligation to end their occupation and siege. That's it. And they have the obligation to negotiate for the release of their captives, which, by the way, Israeli leaders now completely admit is totally at odds. The goal of rescuing the captives is 100% at odds with Israel's current operation. They know full well that the longer they continue this mass murder campaign, the more in jeopardy they're placing that the more in jeopardy that their captors will be. But they don't care, because they just care about making Gaza uninhabitable, because they don't want Palestinians there anymore.
The whole premise of Israel is that it makes Jews safe, and it keeps Jews safe, and it makes them safe. And then without Israel, Jews would be in danger. And then who is actually killing Jews in this case, as we know they did on October 7th, and leaving their hostages to be killed, or killing them themselves, actually, because they've been killing them. Hamas hasn't killed them since October 7th that we know of, but we do know Israel's killed them. It's Israel. Like, we know Israel doesn't care about Palestinian life, but they make that very clear. But they don't even do the one thing that they claim to exist to do.
Over the course of the weeks and days ahead. But we've also been quite clear that there needs to be more humanitarian assistance going into Gaza. They have taken some steps that have been constructive, opening a crossing from Israel into Gaza directly through Kerem Shalom. They've announced in recent days that they're going to allow flour to be delivered to an Israeli port in Ashdod and then brought into Gaza. These are small but consequential steps, but they're also not enough. And so we're going to continue to put the pressure on and continue to try to work day in, day out in excruciating detail to make sure that the humanitarian assistance in Gaza is improved as this conflict shifts to a different phase.
Aaron, the detail is excruciating. Flour, they're letting in flour.
Yeah. The reason he said excruciating is because he knows it's excruciating having to listen to him pretend as if they're doing anything, and as if all these little gestures that they put out there to make it look as if they care about the civilians of Gaza actually means something, when in reality they're completely empty. So he knows it is excruciating to try to lie your way through pretending that you're not supporting a genocide and denying critical aid to the people who are trapped inside a death camp.
Also, they don't have fuel, so what are they going to do with this flour? They're not going to be able to bake it. Maybe they can make a paste out of it.
Yeah.
I want him to go on the Gaza diet. I think John Feiner, I'm not body shaming. I'm just saying I want him to suffer by eating what they're eating, which is nothing but paste. Now they can have flour with water.
It's crazy.
Like, let these people, if that's such an improvement and that's such a consequential action to get flour in, all these people, everyone supporting Israel should be on the Gaza diet, which is apparently flour with water and toxic water. And what else do they have to do? I mean, it's just so disgusting. Really, they should do that. If this is so tolerable and so defensible and defensive on Israel's part, they should, in solidarity, eat what people in Gaza are eating.
All right, let's turn to Democratic Senator Chris Coons, my old pal. We shared
Aaron's train mate.
Yeah, we shared a train ride a few months ago. And he's going to address the fact that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continues to humiliate the Biden administration, because, you know, one of Biden's main talking points is that, all right, we're really going to do a two-state solution this time. We promise. Like, it's going to happen. We're going to get Saudi Arabia on board. We're going to get the Palestinian Authority on board. We're going to do a two-state solution. And Benjamin Netanyahu comes out and says, no, actually, we're not going to have a two-state solution. We're going to control all of the land of Israel from the river to the sea. And he
even said explicitly that precludes a Palestinian state.
Yes, he said there won't be a Palestinian state. So even Biden's fake talking point can't be sustained, because Netanyahu is such a fanatic and just doesn't care. And he knows he has Biden's support no matter what. So he'll even humiliate Biden in front of the entire world. So here is one of Biden's closest allies, Democratic Senator Chris Coons, being asked about that.
Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu seems to be saying one thing in public and another thing in private about a two-state solution. He privately told President Biden, according to a source familiar with their conversation, that he wasn't ruling out a future Palestinian state. But just yesterday, Netanyahu tweeted, quote, "I will not compromise on full Israeli security control over all the territory west of the Jordan, and this is contrary to a Palestinian state." That seems pretty definitive.
It does, and this wouldn't be the first time that there is some tension between Prime Minister Netanyahu, his personal political goals and aims, and the challenges of crafting a positive, peaceful path forward for the Israeli and Palestinian people.
There's no tension, by the way, because Netanyahu is simply actually expressing what has been Israel policy forever. So Yitzhak Rabin, who was the first Israeli prime minister to sign a peace deal with the Palestinian Authority, with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which became the Palestinian Authority, he said, our goal is to not see a Palestinian state. He just envisioned some limited autonomy for a collaborator regime like the Palestinian Authority ruling over Palestinian areas of the West Bank and Gaza, while Israel takes up all the other land and water that it wants. So there actually is no tension at all between Netanyahu and U.S. policy, because it's U.S. has never supported an actual real Palestinian state. They've just supported this farce where they pretend as if they support it while letting Israel steal all the land that it wants.
Right. And Mark Regev, the ambassador, former ambassador, actually confirmed this, that even Yitzhak Rabin wasn't offering a state. That's and, another interesting thing is Gideon Levy has said this, the journalist who we interviewed. He said everyone who wanted a two-state solution, like back in the day, when that was actually possible, the people who now are calling for it opposed it because it was possible. And now that it's not possible because of the settlements, people who used to oppose it are all of a sudden, open to it.
Yeah, I'm still in the minority on this. I still think it's possible, even though it feels impossible, because those settlements have no legal validity. You cannot move your population into territory you've occupied. That's a violation of the Geneva Convention. So if there was an actual two-state solution, as an interim step towards ultimately what I would hope for is equality for everybody, just as like something in the meanwhile, you can tell all these settlers, like, you want to live under Palestine, okay, but you have to submit to Palestinian rule, and the Israeli army, which is funded by the U.S. and armed by the U.S., is not going to protect you. I mean, this is like a pipe dream. It's not going to happen, but I do think that could be that's a reasonable proposal. And then I think a lot of settlers would leave because they don't want to, because they're fanatic racists.
Right.
And if they didn't leave, then too bad. Then they get kicked out and homeless, which is, the least they deserve for stealing Palestinian land in the first place. So yeah, anyway, that's my proposal for a two-state solution.
Yeah, I had during an interview, a live stream I did with Mourning Rabbani, he kind of made that point, which he doesn't think it's impossible, a two-state solution, but he doesn't know if it's the right thing to do, which is an interesting argument. I have to actually turn that into a clip. I'll do that soon.
Well, the right thing to do, obviously, is equality for everybody, right? It's one state. But my problem is because Israel's nuclear weapons and is so fanatic, I just don't know how you get there now. So what if you could at least get Israel to respect international law first, give up the West Bank and Gaza, which I know is a huge compromise for Palestinians because all of their land was stolen, not just the West Bank and Gaza, but just as like a provisional step towards an eventual one-state reality. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, but back to Chris Coons.
Aaron's friend.
Yes.
Look, Dana, this is one of those moments where I'm grateful we have a president with decades of actual experience, engagement in the region.
With decades of actual experience telling us he's a Zionist.
He
has been telling us for decades.
There's that famous anecdote where he tells Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin that he should kill more civilians in Lebanon. And even Begin was like offended by Biden because he was such a fanatic. And of course, Biden supported every single horrible war, including the Iraq War. That's his decades of engagement with the region, which is making it worse and causing mass death.
Where I'm grateful we have a president with decades of actual experience, engagement in the region, who knows all the relevant leaders. When I was recently at a conference in Europe and had a chance to meet in person with the foreign minister, prime minister of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, I heard directly how progress is being made on putting together a path forward for a Palestinian state, for recognition between the Saudis and the Israelis, and how despite some of Prime Minister Netanyahu's rhetoric, there is a real prospect for regional peace. That happens because of President Biden's leadership.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, though, of course, is still in charge in Israel. Is he an obstacle to ending the war and finding that peace you're talking about?
Well, he has a record of years of dividing the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and weakening it, and accepting the leadership of Hamas that has had a tragic consequence on the October 7th assault on thousands of innocent civilians, 1,200 innocent civilians murdered in Israel. This is a moment where the Israeli public needs to choose what is the best path forward. And I know it would be a significant step for them to accept that the creation of a Palestinian state is the right path forward out of this shattering loss from the October 7th attacks. But many who have long experience in Israel and in the region think the only way to end the constant cycle of violence is to choose the path of peace.
Oh, yes.
Well, you know, it's worth noting that he called out, I mean, whatever, we're still supporting Netanyahu, but he acknowledged how Netanyahu weakened the PLO and strengthened Hamas, which I don't think has been acknowledged before.
Right, but what he really wants, though, is for a empowered Palestinian Authority who can serve as a collaborator to the U.S. and Israel, and basically accept the scraps that the U.S. and Israel want to throw them, and police the Palestinians that live there, and basically keep them from rising up. Netanyahu is such a loudmouth that he makes that difficult, because he can't help but say there'll never be a Palestinian state. What the U.S. wants to do with Israel is say, yeah, look, we're going to have a Palestinian state. But then you look at it and it's just basically a series of disconnected cantons where people are caged in, much like people are caged in inside Gaza. And Netanyahu, because he just can't help but blurt out his fanaticism, he makes that difficult. So that's what Coons is really upset about, because if they really wanted a Palestinian state, it's very simple. There's a global consensus for it. It's already a huge compromise by Palestinians. Their leadership, including Hamas, have accepted 22% of historic Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza. The U.S. and Israel won't even give them that, because they want to keep these massive West Bank settlement blocks and not swap land of equal size and value inside Israel with Palestine, which makes a two-state solution impossible. It's already a huge compromise for Palestinians, and both the U.S. and Israel, no matter who's in power, are so fanatic that they won't even accept a Palestinian compromise.
So terrible.
Okay, Senator Chris Van Hollen is a Democrat as well, and for the first time, he's kind of postured as being somewhat concerned about Palestinian human rights. For the first time, he's now calling for a ceasefire.
Now is the Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. He's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He has visited the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt just a few weeks ago. Senator, thank you for being with us again. We appreciate it. I don't know how many ways to say this. The U.S. government and Israel's government are not seeing eye to eye on how to or whether Israel should end the war, despite being pressed on it by both Secretary Blinken and President Biden this week. Netanyahu gave a news conference on Thursday in which he said, quote, "I will not compromise on full Israeli control over the entire area west of the Jordan, and this is contrary to a Palestinian state," end quote. This is a problem.
Ali, it's a very big problem. You have Prime Minister Netanyahu, again, directly and publicly rebuffing the President of the United States. And this is part of a pattern. The United States has requested repeatedly that the Netanyahu coalition reduce the huge number of civilian casualties in Gaza. They're going up, 2/3 of the dead, women and children. You have a humanitarian catastrophe going from terrible to worse. And you have a prime minister who clearly is not prioritizing the return of the hostages. He is putting his own political skin above the hostages. So it seems to me that it is time that we have a ceasefire, a return of the hostages, and President Biden needs to go big and bold. He needs to put forward that vision of a two-state solution. It is the only way to create some light at the end of this very dark tunnel, to provide the security that will prevent future October 7th, and to provide self-determination and dignity to all the Palestinian people who have nothing to do with Hamas in a state of their own. That needs to be the goal of the United States.
So listen, better than Biden's stance, obviously, but it's still empty because there's a very simple. If you really cared about all the goals that he says he stands for, including a ceasefire, you'd say we're going to stop arming and funding Israel. We're going to impose conditions on it because obviously Israel's not going to do anything just because it's asked. There needs to be costs and consequences. So I hope Senator Chris Van Hollen, if he really means what he says, will actually attach some action to it rather than just talking about it on cable news. And, you can see how little he's prepared to do, given that it's only now he's calling for a ceasefire. There should have been a ceasefire on day one and a negotiated release of the captives then.
And again, I will say it's a good point that he makes, which is that Netanyahu is prioritizing his career over releasing the hostages. And, all these bring them home now, Amy Schumer, Brett Gelman, Deborah Messing, all of you should be mad if you actually cared about Jewish lives, which you claim to. You'd be up in arms about what Netanyahu is doing. But you don't, because you actually care more about killing Palestinians than you do about saving Jewish lives.
Well, Katie, since we're talking celebrities, this brings up what I think must have been a challenging moment for you recently, where you were placed on a list of Jews who were deemed to be non-real Jews, and the author of this list was none other than, chief rabbi of all Jewish people, Michael Rapaport.
Weak-ass Jews, yeah.
Weak-ass Jews.
Weak-ass Jews.
He called you a weak-ass Jew.
And I offered to, I very kindly offered to have him debate any of us weak-ass Jews. And as a strong-ass Zionist, I thought he'd jump at the chance. I was on the list. Max Blumenthal was on the list. Norman Finkelstein was on the list. Kenneth Roth of Human Rights Watch was on the list. I think I'm leaving someone off, but Aaron,
let's check the source material. Here it is right here. There it is. Michael Rapaport. As a Jew, I'm here to sow on little spelling mistake there. I'm here to sow on behalf of all Jews that we don't F with these weak ass as a Jews. Norman Finkelstein, Max Blumenthal, Ken Roth, Katie Halper, Peter Beinart. Shout out to Eli Lake in his latest podcast episode.
Also, it's funny, he's mad at us for saying as a Jew, because what I've been doing, a lot of us will say as a Jew, because usually the people who say as a Jew all too often are ones saying as a Jew, we need to, I'm paraphrasing, but as a Jew, we need to kill Palestinians, right? And so a bunch of Jews, like those on the list, are saying, well, as a Jew, actually, I don't want you to kill Palestinians. Or Norman Finkelstein is saying, as the son of Holocaust survivors, all of the rest of my family having been killed during the Holocaust, I say not in my name. Or someone like your father, Gabor Mate, himself a Holocaust survivor, right? But the irony is that Michael Rapaport himself is saying as a Jew.
Yes.
But he's not.
Katie, the show is forever changed knowing that I'm co-hosting it now with a weak-ass Jew.
I know.
Who Michael Rapaport is not effing with anymore. It's going to be hard for me going forward. But
not effing with us anymore, yeah.
The show is going to take a hit. It is.
Take a big hit.
Yeah.
He also went after Norman Finkelstein in another tweet. And I said, so debate him, but he hasn't said anything.
You know who else went after Norman Finkelstein is Jamal Bowman.
Yeah. What happened? They appeared at some event together, and then I guess Bowman got shit.
Jamal Bowman introduced Norman Finkelstein at an event and said, "I'm such a fan." He's like, "Well, I'm a little nervous right now because I'm such a fan." And then the New York Post ran a story about that, and brought up some of Norman's quotes about October 7th. And then Jamal Bowman denounced Norman Finkelstein and said, "Oh, I wasn't really familiar with. I didn't know about his comments. After being a huge fan, all of a sudden he tried to disavow Norman, and Norman's been dealing with that his whole career. Yeah. Is people selling him out,
right?
Because he keeps it too real.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have a little bit more time. And we can play some other clips.
Should we go out with what we have time for? One more clip?
Yeah, we have time for one or two more.
We do. Okay. I definitely want the Tim Scott in there.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, how about we start with Nikki Haley talking about Donald Trump's cognitive issues, because Donald Trump has been saying some things recently that Nikki Haley is going to fact check.
Former President Trump on Friday repeatedly and wrongly said that you were in charge of the January 6th security response at the Capitol, and he said your name 4 times. I want to play this for our viewers.
They never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley, you know, did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything, deleted and destroyed all of it, because of lots of things. Like Nikki Haley is in charge of security.
It's unclear what he's talking about as being deleted, but you said yesterday hearing this made you question Donald Trump's mental fitness. Is that the first time you questioned his mental fitness?
If you look recently, there have been multiple things. I mean, he claimed that Joe Biden was going to get us into World War II. I'm assuming he meant World War III. He said that he ran against President Obama. He never ran against President Obama. He says that I'm the one that kept security from the Capitol on January 6th. I was nowhere near the Capitol on January 6th. But Margaret, you don't be surprised if you have someone that's 80 in office. Their mental stability is going to continue to decline. That's just human nature. We know that. What I'm saying is, first of all, you're talking about somebody who's only going to be in office 4 years. Secondly, you're talking about someone who continues to, I mean, look, I don't know if he was confused. I don't know what happened, but it should be enough to send us a warning sign that if you look Joe Biden, he's very different than he was 2 years ago. Are we really going to go into a situation where we have wars around the world and we're trying to prevent war, and we're going to have someone who we can or can't?
Fact check. Nikki Haley's not trying to prevent war.
Not at all.
Let's just fact check that one. Not trying to prevent war, trying to start wars wherever possible. Not that Joe Biden or Donald Trump are much different, but Nikki Haley's definitely not trying to prevent wars.
Can't be sure that they're going to get confused. It's a real issue. That's not being disrespectful. It's just a fact.
I mean, it's a fair point. We have 2 elderly candidates, Biden and Trump, that are not fully with it. But then you got to compare it with someone like Nikki Haley, who's like an unhinged warmonger and does want to have wars everywhere. And it's like, you know, what kind of crazy do you want? Do you want the crazy of no, I shouldn't say crazy, you know, what kind of mental state do you want? Someone who's in their 80s, maybe suffering some cognitive decline, or younger, but just an even more energized warmonger. Then certainly Nikki, as we talked about earlier, Nikki Haley is more of a warmonger than Donald Trump. That is true. Trump is a warmonger, but Nikki Haley is in another category. And of course, Joe Biden and Nikki Haley are pretty equal in that respect. I don't see much difference between them at all in policy, except that Nikki Haley's more maybe overtly racist than Joe Biden is, even though Biden's pretty racist too when it comes to Palestinians. But Nikki Haley talks about having like Palestinians go move to Turkey or Iran. I don't think,
or finish them.
Yeah, or finish it. Like Joe Biden probably thinks that, but doesn't say it out loud.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, well, to go out, we're going to turn to some news from the primary where Senator Tim Scott from Nikki Haley's state, South Carolina, he's just swung his endorsement to Donald Trump. And they appeared together. I believe this is in New Hampshire.
Hello, New Hampshire!
He sounds like he's drunk. He's like slurring. It's very weird the way he talks in this.
This Donald Trump country! Oh, yeah. That's it. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. You know, thank you. Let me say, we need a president who will close our southern border today. We need Donald Trump. We need a president. We need a president who.
Trump looks annoyed that he doesn't have the microphone.
It's true, yeah. He wants to grab it, yeah.
Yeah. Is that enough of this? Have we seen enough?
Well, I wanted to, let me just let me play a little bit more.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Will unite our country. We need Donald Trump. We need a president who will protect your Social Security and my mama's Social Security. We need Donald Trump. We need a president today who will stop the crime and recklessness in the streets. We need a president who will restore law and order. We need Donald Trump. Oh, we need a president who will lower our taxes and not raise our taxes. We need a president like Donald Trump. We need a...
He sounds so unsure when he says
I know.
Donald Trump. There's like a pause.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe he's still trying to convince himself.
Yeah. Or he's like, who did I endorse? Who's winning? DeSantis, Haley, Trump?
President who understands the American people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. We need a president our foreign adversaries are afraid of.
Okay, so what I like about this clip is not only is it like the most unsuccessful attempt at getting people to chant something because he can't remember who he's saying we need, but notice how he says the American people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's a line from Fannie Lou Hamer, who is a civil rights activist and was extremely brave and the victim of police brutality. She was beaten in jail. She was shot at by the KKK. And she delivered this speech with Malcolm X, where she said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And something tells me that Tim Scott is not a big Malcolm X fan. Don't think that that's the radical tradition from which Tim Scott hails. So good on him, though, for bringing out the Fannie Lou Hamer quote. I thought it was kind of funny. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you haven't had enough of the Useful Idiots universe, you're in luck because tonight at what time, Katie? 8:30?
8 p.m. 8 p.m.
8 p.m. Eastern time at the Katie Halper Show on YouTube.
Yeah,
Tell
let
us,
me
Katie,
do.
what you have in store.
We have a great live show that I'll be hosting with. Brianna Joy Gray. In fact, here, let me show you. Let me do a little screen share so we can see what this looks like. But I'll be hosting it with Brianna Joy Gray, and we'll be hosting it. We're going to be talking to Maureen Rabbani. Here we go. Maureen Rabbani and Norman Finkelstein. And Wilson put it in the chat. As you can see, it says Israel. Well, you can't really see. It says Israel on trial. And that's going to be at 8 p.m. tonight, Monday, 8 p.m. We'll be talking about the International Court of Justice. And it's going to be a great time. So tune in.
Tune into that 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight. That's Monday, January 22nd.
Yes.
And our website is usefulidiotspodcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content. And thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.